Assalamu alaikum, fam. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of Hobbes. It's been highly educational. Really helps you to see what was that English style of thinking like back then. This is the Enlightenment period, and people are wondering about where should Europe and humankind go. So this offers us an insight into that time period's thought process. Let's continue. Ignorance of remote causes disposeth men to attribute all events to the causes immediate and instrumental. So you're not aware of faraway causes of something, you'll then attribute that to the instrumental or immediate causes that are presented in front of you. For these are all causes they perceive. So he's contending like you may not see the remote reason of why something has happened, so you'll then look to what is near to you to reflect on that. Oh, little squirrely squirrel, he's eating some of the pumpkin bread I left out for him. And hence it comes to pass that in all places men that are grieved with payments to the public discharge their anger upon the publicans. That is to say, farmers, collectors, and other officers of the public revenue. So here, what is he getting at? Is that you're upset, and you're going to be mad at those who have to collect something, who require some sort of payment. Farmers, unfortunately, especially under Stalin's collectivization program, they were targeted as the bourgeoisie. So sometimes farmers are punished unjustly for something that's not their fault. So anyone who has to collect some sort of revenue is going to be blamed for stuff. And adhere to such as find fault with the public government, and thereby, when they have engaged themselves beyond hope of justification, fall also upon supreme authority for fear of punishment or shame of receiving pardon. So when they've engaged themselves beyond hope of justification, so they've done something that is unjustifiable. Well, now they're going to have to go to the supreme authority, that one who's in charge. And out of fear, or, getting a pardon, even if they feel shameful about it. Ignorance of natural causes disposeth the man to credulity, so as to believe many times in impossibilities. So, if they don't know the natural cause of something, they're going to put it to something that's impossible. So credulities. Interesting perspective. For such know nothing to the contrary, but they may be true, being unable to detect the impossibility and credulity. Because men love to be hearkened unto in company. Think about what he just said there. Humans like people who agree with them to come to them. To hearken means to come near. Unto in company means like, birds of a feather flock together, they're of like minds. Like minds like to mingle. That's a good point. Disposeth them to lying. Oh, jeez. I didn't know that part was coming, right? He's like, you men like to be hearkened unto company, and they're disposed to lying. It's like, jeez. You could see Hobbes' psychology in his writings a lot, He's a pretty interesting guy. So that ignorance itself without malice is able to make a man both to believe lies and tell them. So notice this, ignorance without malice. So you're maybe ignorant, but it doesn't mean you're doing it out of a malicious way, and this then causes you to believe lies and tell them, because you're ignorant. Notice the differentiation here, though. You're not telling lies because you are malicious. You're doing it because you generally don't know. And sometimes also to invent them. Anxiety for the future time disposeth men to inquire into the causes of things. Now that's true. Definitely, yeah. I mean, anxiety prompts you to find solutions to things. How many times, especially with women, you're anxious, you're like, okay, I gotta fix this, okay, what caused this? How can I keep this safe? What's causing this? Like you're scanning, just trying to find out solutions, right? Men do this too, but in a different aspect, especially at work with logistics, right? Definitely problem solving. right? You're anxious, you want kind of that, not to go absurd routes, but you want to have this sort of eagerness to find things out and fix them. Because the knowledge of them maketh men the better able to order the present to their best advantage. Exactly. So you want to order the present to your best advantage, and anxiety for the future helps with that. People who live in the winter seasons have that type of forethought, right? Winter is coming. Okay, we have to stock for this, gotta prepare. Think about Prophet Yusuf, may Allah be pleased with him, how, helping Egypt to have their grain supply. This sort of forethought. Famine's coming, we need to prepare, we're anxious. Not just, there's always going to be a bunch of bananas around, so therefore we don't need to plan because the weather will always be tropical. It's very different, right? Very different. And one could argue that even people who live in the desert, they have a more scarcity of water. So it's like, there's this different type of aspect of reality that comes from the type of weather you live in, right? It's really quite fascinating. And that also creates a different type of persona in the people for how they plan, right? It's really interesting. Curiosity, or a love of the knowledge of causes, draws a man from consideration of the effect to seek the cause. So you're curious, you love knowledge, you want to find the cause, and you want to find out what's the effect, what happens with this and that, inquisitory nature, right? That's probably how we got fire. Someone's scraping the flint. Oh, I'll blow on it and whoa. What happens when I put this in the fire? What happens when I do that, right? Think about all the people who did herbology. They had to test all these different plants to see what were the effects and how, you can use them for stomach aches or chamomile, go to sleep, right? You name it. It's amazing. The curiosity of the ancients and trying to find out solutions and what causes this, it's pretty apparent, how that comes about. And again, the cause of that cause, till of necessity he must come to this thought at last. There is some cause, whereof there is no former cause, but is eternal, which is men call God. Yeah, so God is he was never born, so there was no former before him. So that it is impossible to make any profound inquiry into natural causes without being inclined thereby to believe that there is one God eternal. Ooh, monotheism. Hobbes is saying got a little monotheism going on. Though they cannot have an idea of him in their mind. Now this is quite interesting. Cannot have the idea of him. We humans cannot conceptualize God fully because we have a pattern of comparing everything to the environment around us, right? We observe, we recognize a pattern, but we know that Allah Azza wa Jal, there's nothing comparable to him in reality, right? It's very different than how the artists in Renaissance Europe, painted God as a humanoid figure which encapsulated him and then allowed, the satire of other religions to mock that conception of God. That's a big reason why no engraven image is very intelligent, because once you get a stupid statue, it's like, what are you doing, man? Right? It's ridiculous. Because a statue is an idea. It's a sort of interaction between it. And you can see this with the Buddhists when they go with their Buddha. Oh, it's just a symbol. It's just to remind us. But then they start acting really strange about it. And then it's like you only think about, nirvana and stuff when you're around the Buddha statue. You get into some weirdness going on. So it's quite interesting how Hobbes here is saying you cannot really have an idea in your mind of it, and there's an eternal God with no formal cause, and he says one God. If Hobbes was alive today, we're going to convert him to Islam. Answerable to his nature. For as man that is born blind, hearing men talk of warming themselves by the fire, and being brought to warm himself by the same, may easily conceive, and assure himself there is somewhat there which men call fire. So that's interesting. So you're born, you have to learn around your environment. Then you hear people talking about a fire, you go there, get warmed by it, and you recognize this is what they call fire. So he's talking about the learning process, essentially. And is the cause of the heat he feels, but cannot imagine what it is like. Yeah, so you can feel the heat, but you can't imagine what it's like to be fire. Interesting. Nor have an idea of what it is in his mind. So he hears, if he hasn't encountered it, he hears there's this thing called fire. You sit by it and you get warm. Hasn't encountered it yet, but he's hearing others talk about it. It's very interesting. Such as they have that see it. So, interesting, yeah. That kind of makes you wonder about the signs of Allah and how others recognize a sign and others who don't, they just have to hear others talk about it. That's a good example, if you think about it. Someone's trying to talk about fire and you've never seen a fire, you're like, huh. And you hear them talk about the attributes. I saw this, yet fire is more tangible. Yet the recognition of something through the speech of other people, I think, is what he's getting at. So also, by the visible things of this world. Yeah, exactly, yeah. The visible versus the unseen. And there is admirable order. See, I like that. Admirable order. That's a cool phrase. There really is an order. I mean, the ecosystems are really intense. Really intense. Just the fact that, think about it. So what's an admirable order? Well, the rain season comes, fall comes, the trees drop their leaves, goes into the soil, the water saturates the leaves so that they break down, the chemical agents, whatever you call that, nutrients in the leaves break down, go in the soil, mushrooms, bacteria grows under that, and they sprout up. Some of them are toxic, you can't eat, but they will then decompose, go back into the soil, and be food for the root systems of other plants. But some edible mushrooms grow, and if you're starving and you ain't no meat, you go cut up the mushrooms and you eat it. So I mean, you're gonna survive, during a rain season when maybe the deer are going too fast for you to catch, right? Or your goats, there's not too much food around. Your goat's gonna have something, or you see what I'm saying? It's like a life cycle. So through the tree dropping its leaves, that creates another life form that you can eat, because the harvest season has its own temperate time in different parts of the equator. But it is an admirable order when you actually start to look at the cycles, right? When things bloom, when they don't, when there's drought, when there's this, that there's always something going on, right? We just have to perceive it. Very cool point, right? A man may conceive there is a cause of them, which men call God, and yet have an idea, and yet not have an idea, or image of him in his mind. That's interesting. So he's admitting here for us, that's interesting, you can conceive of a cause of God even if you can't imagine an image of God in your mind, right? And I think it's better that we don't even try to encapsulate God as this bearded person, because it causes, why do the artists do that, And they just take that one part from the Bible. We created man in our image, and therefore they think that God looks like human. And, you get into the metaphorical interpretations, the allegorical, and then you have the literalists. It's like, no, God literally has this, but then you have people say, no, befits his majesty. So, humans throughout time have constantly tried to depict a creator in some way, right? Placing him in certain things and trying to encapsulate within the human mind that they can almost sublime method types of ways of conceptualizing God with this overarching awe. But at the same time, you're still limiting God, and you have to recognize our tiny little brains. There's only so much computing power. I mean, some people can't even fry an egg, let alone imagine what God is like. You feel more God in your heart rather than the eye's literal perception of God, right? I mean, we see the sun, but we can't really see the sun without roasting our eyeballs out, right? We see the moon, but don't really see the moon like poking in with our fingers, right? So that's very interesting. Hobbes is getting deep on us, right? He's making us wonder about our life. Very cool.